Committee meeting to order. Mr. Wilborn, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Representing Educational District 5 and Board Chair, and she's also present via Teams. We have Ms. Erica Mitchell. Present. Okay.
Present.
Representing Educational District at Large, seat 7, and Chairman of the Policy Committee, we have Mr. Alfred Shivy Brooks.
Present.
And representing Educational District at Large, seat 8, we have Ms. Cynthia Briscoe Brown.
Present.
Also present, we have our General Counsel, Madam Nina Gupta, and our Chief of Policy, Ms. Erica Long. Chairman Brooks, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I would now entertain a motion to approve the September 16, 2025 Policy Review Committee minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Board Member
Second.
Briscoe Brown, seconded by Chair Mitchell. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the November 11th, 2025 Policy Review Committee meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Board Member Briscoe Brown, seconded by Chair Mitchell. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now review the policies on the agenda. Ms. Erica Long, will you please present the policy?
Yes, thank you so much. We have before us proposed revisions to policy AD, school attendance zones. These would be final approval. These are changes to the policy that we felt necessary just to sort of align our policy with facilities master planning work and the overall work of the district around setting school attendance zones. These are changes that you saw for first reading last month. There's first an addition of a paragraph just spelling out the purpose of setting these attendance zones and what we look to establish, including balance in the number of students across schools, reducing overcrowding, and ensuring appropriate utilization of school resources. We talk about how school attendance zone lines can be revised as needed to reduce overcrowding and to set attendance zones for new schools. Further down in the policy, we added language sort of describing what a healthily populated school would look like. We did not want to go into population or numbers, but just talk about schools having enrollment large enough to offer certain factors: alternative placement options for students at each grade level, optimum support services for exceptional children, etc. Middle and high schools should have an enrollment large enough to offer a comprehensive PE and intramural sports program, diverse extracurricular offerings, advanced instructional opportunities, etc. Current language of the policy calls for an annual report from the superintendent to the board on school utilization and capacity rates. That report currently happens around February or so of each year, and we have been pretty good about sticking to that rhythm of reporting out to the board. We also suggest additional language that these reports shall be timed to inform the district's planning for ESPLOS solicitations, that we can keep the ESPLOS in mind, but that's not the sole purpose of these annual reports. And pretty straightforward changes. We added just at the very end where you authorize the superintendent to develop administrative regulations to implement this policy for setting school attendance zones and for consideration of school closure decisions. So once again, the idea is to more closely align this policy work with the work already happening across the administration around long-term facilities planning.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or any input from our colleagues?
Did we incorporate all of the changes we discussed last month in here?
These are those changes.
Okay.
There was a question during the one-on-one meetings with the superintendent. There was a question from a board member about whether you should consider adding a specific month for that annual report on school capacity from the administration to the board. We're already doing that work generally in February of every year. And it could be a little restrictive to name a certain month in the policy. But so far, just having that expectation of an annual report has lined up with our practice as well.
I think setting a specific month seems to, based on prior experience, seems to sort of set us up for failure, because we don't always follow that every year. I think it was, what was it, the Equity Task Force was supposed to give us a report every November.
Yes.
And it's not always, I think we need to grant those who set the agenda and those who do the work flexibility as to when that report happens, as long as it's annually. Okay? I'm fine with this.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I struggle, and we kind of talked about this in the hall earlier, that many times we commit to a thing, but there really aren't consequences to whether or not we do the thing. And so we don't hold to what we say we're going to do. In the spirit of knowing better and doing better, I would like for us to consider at least some time frame. If we said between the months of January and March, or January and February, if we gave some type of grace period, but also some form of intentionality too, I think maybe could be a good balance between both. East Bloss votes typically come up in November of every 5 years. So you had,
We've won it
16,
before that.
21, 25, correct. And so I'm kind of working backwards as I think about, there'll be a lot of circumstances that a report will make sense for us, but I think there's some specific, the East Bloss conversation, planning out for potential scenarios. Like, we want to have that information so we're not in a place that we're investing millions of dollars into a building that we might have to go in a different direction with. So based upon your experience, what do you think is the most helpful time for us to have that information?
I would probably prefer that the policy say annually, and then let's work with the administration to adopt a regulation that says, I can see in a year like 26, when SPLOST is coming up, we might want that report earlier.
Right.
In an off year, it might fall into January or February.
Could we
So-
specifically say that
but-
on East Bloss years that we seek to do a January, February report?
Well, if I could just add, of course, the East Bloss work does not just appear here within this policy.
Right.
Think about past East Bloss rounds where there have been, heavy board participation through retreats and, other decision-making along a process that takes close to 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
So this policy mention is just one place, but it's not your only opportunity to lean in and participate as a board.
Understood. So does it help us to leave it as it is, or?
And probably leaving it as it is, because also remember, East Bloss votes don't necessarily have to happen in November.
Right.
I can think of times they've happened in March during primary election season instead. So putting a specific month might not serve the board.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm
I wanna get
usually in
time in.
favor of adding flexibility rather than specificity at the policy level. And then if any additional specificity needs to be added, then that can happen in a regulation.
Yes.
I think Erica
I think Chair Mitchell has something to say.
No, I don't have anything to say anymore. Y'all got it. So it's good.
Okay.
Okay, so are we moving this forward for final approval?
I'm good with that. Chair Mitchell?
Yes, I'm in favor of moving it for final approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next policy up is policy JB, student attendance. These changes would be on second reading for this committee. You will recall that you've done quite a bit of work with our student social work team just around this student attendance policy, how it reflects changes that happened in the legislature earlier this school year. And they gave you a really comprehensive update on how the legislative action mirrors a lot of what they have been doing as a team already. We wanted to bring back policy changes just to add some additional suggestions that our team wanted beyond what the legislation called for. You'll see here on the policy draft markup version, we wanted to make clear that statement around compulsory school attendance. Georgia law requires children ages 6 to 16 to attend school for 180 days each school year. Further down in the policy, there is new language up under the parental notification section. We added a definition of chronic absenteeism. This is a definition both from the legislation and from current law, and that's defined as missing 10% or more of enrolled days during a school year for any reason. The next new paragraph talks about the responsibilities of schools and school districts that have a chronic absenteeism rate of 15% or higher. The legislation gives us certain things to do that we've already put in place as an administration, establishing that attendance review team, the responsibilities of that group consisting of school administrators, counselors, school social workers, and those teams are collaborating to align root cause analysis of chronic absenteeism with targeted interventions for the impacted students. It goes on to talk about our responsibilities to provide notice to the parents and families of these students. Of course, there is a judicial proceeding aspect to this work as well. And that is it. But we are hopeful that with this committee's approval, we can put all these changes in front of the full board for first reading.
Any comments or inquiries from my colleagues?
Question.
Board Member Briscoe Brown.
The last new paragraph on the second page, where we, by September 1st of each school year, or within 30 days of a student's enrollment, the parent will be asked to sign a statement indicating receipt of such written statement of possible consequences and penalties, and then students age 10 or older will be asked to sign that as well. Do we have a good track record for getting every single parent in the system to sign documents like that? As a parent myself, I'm skeptical, knowing that years ago we went to an opt-out media release format rather than an opt-in because we had so much trouble getting parents to sign things. Is this realistic? And what lengths are we going to go to if a parent either doesn't get the written summary, forgets to send it back, refuses to sign it? What are we going to do about that?
Well, I agree. It's written as very general language in terms of a statement that is sent out to every family. I would presume that in practice, it's a statement that we want to get in front of those targeted students with the absenteeism issues. Dr. Anthony, Dr. Ford, is there anything that you all would like to add just about how that works in the schoolhouse around? And you can feel that.
I just don't want to set us up for a parent saying, I never saw it, or I didn't sign that, and therefore you can't do anything to me.
So we would typically ensure that it's in the student handbook so that parents who receive the student handbook, and we're doing it electronically, so that when they get the student handbook, they can see that it was in there. Typically, when we have to go to court, we definitely want to make sure that we have exhausted all avenues to get the parent's signature. And so what we would do is we, of course, would check to see if we had it on file. And if not, then, of course, we would try to document, put it in the contact log and all those kinds of things to document that we did every effort to try to get it signed.
This specifically requires that we get the parent to sign by September 1st of every year.
Correct.
And so if we're into February and we have a chronically absent student, then I'm a little concerned about that coming back to affect our case negatively if we have to impose consequences.
So typically, when you say case, I'm assuming you're talking about for court purposes. Or are we talking about for the law purposes?
I think for both.
Okay. So as long as we've made every effort, because every student should get the student handbook, correct? So if we've made every effort to get that signature, we've and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to lean in on my lawyers. If we have done that, then we've made every effort to obtain the signature. So those student handbooks go out at the beginning of the school year, which of course is prior to September 1st. So if we've made every effort and it's in the student that signature page, we've made the effort to get the signature.
Then at a minimum, I would suggest that in the language about students age 10 or older, that we not say must sign a statement, but
Okay.
will be asked to sign a statement.
Yeah, I
And I'm
agree.
still a little concerned about whether we are setting ourselves up for negative consequences if we ask and then we don't get the response that we're looking for.
Yeah, it's a functional matter. It kind of works like the student code of conduct where we ask every student to sign and acknowledge a receipt. So many students don't, but because we make it so widely available online, in hard copy, in classrooms, students are presumed to be on notice, whether they sign or not.
But, okay, then at a minimum, I think we need to change that word
Will be
must
asked to sign,
to
yes.
make it match the parent one.
Yes.
I have a question about whether or not it's wet signature only, or if we also allow for digital signatures as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And I'm wondering if, like, as a district, I'm almost never, and, you know, just in my regular adult life, I'm almost never wet signing much of anything anymore. And I'm curious if it will help us to procure more signatures if we're allowing for a DocuSign or something of equivalent.
I believe there's a digital signature component to the device policy, the parental notification.
So there's precedent
consent.
for,
So there is an ability to do that.
is that something that we are open to consider? Is that something that needs to be in policy, that it could be a wet or virtual signature, or does that not matter?
I don't think it needs to be in policy. I think that's just an administrative choice. And if there's a way to implement that, I think that's a great idea.
Does it add like $150,000 a year cost to us for using digital signatures? It's gonna show up on consent somewhere.
We'll put Alfred Chivy Brooks beside
Yeah, put
it,
my
too.
name on it, thanks, yeah. But you know what, if it helps us to cover ourselves
Yes.
and helps to ease access for our families, I think, you know, it's something to consider, to get with the time kind of thing. Chair Mitchell, did you have any questions or input on this?
No, not at the moment. I do not.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Briscoe Brown has another comment. Don't be sorry.
It's the third new paragraph on the second page. The school system shall provide, I think we talked about this last time. There's a word missing in there. Shall provide notice to the parent, guardian, or other person when the student has 5 unexcused absences.
Yes. Yes, correct. Thank you.
What are we gonna do without you? What are we gonna do without you? There's gonna be typos all through our policies forever.
I was a proofreader in my
without you.
former life, so.
Somebody else.
Make it. We didn't make it this month.
No, I'm talking about the board agenda. We've set an internal goal to not let Cynthia Briscoe Brown find a single typo.
Right.
So,
She'll call into the board meetings and, right.
I will say I was a proofreader in my former life. I will take on that burden.
Come on now. That's it. Listen, you got big shoes to fill now, okay?
I'm sorry to be annoying about that, but it doesn't mean anything when we say the school system
Shall
shall provide.
provide, right.
No, that's
We're not
not,
saying
what?
what it is we're providing.
that's
you.
necessary. That's necessary, not
And we
annoying.
have the notice in the next sentence, but that's not good enough. We need it there.
Okay,
It's not a complete sentence.
Right.
all right. Do we support moving this forward after the changes?
And this will be second read, but not final approval?
No, this is second read by the committee, moving it on for first read by the full board.
Got it, okay. Yeah,
I would just want to make sure all the changes are in this document before it's moved forward. But I am in favor of moving it forward.
I'll
Those changes.
proofread it.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Board Member Briscoe Brown.
That's right. We're gonna get all that good talent from you before you go on. All right, Ms. Long, would you like to move on to the next policy?
Yes, thank you. The next policy is another set of changes precipitated by legislative action. This is policy DJEA, Purchasing Authority. The legislature actually spent a couple of years working on increasing, that should be a PDF, working on increasing the threshold for public works contracts and the bid requirements related to them.
I'm sorry, you're going to need to walk us through these. I have two clean copies and no
Not
markup.
exactly. I'm having that same problem. Give me a second to pull up a markup copy.
I do
Or
have
can we,
one. I have one here.
can we get copies? Shivy's got one. Can we get copies of those and maybe move on and
I
come
have
back
one
to
that's
this one?
marked.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Yeah,
Okay. Michael, can we maybe,
yeah, because I have two of the same, of the clean and.
yeah, I have two clean and nothing else.
It should be one markup.
And it's just hard to know what we're talking about without the
Yeah,
markup version.
There are quite a few changes, and moving on to so we need the markup version for policy DJEA, Purchasing Authority, just the one with the red
Want
lines
to
on
take
it.
this one and just copy it, Michael?
Yeah. Can we just color copy this one? Like we're having some,
Thank you, Mr. Wilborn.
If you're ready to move on to the next policy on the agenda,
Yes, ma'am.
We can look at-
DJEAC.
DJEAC, Purchasing or Credit Card Use.
Have
Share
that
my
marked
screen.
up.
I've got that one.
You got that one? Okay. You know what's funny? I don't think I have that one.
Sure you, Michael, what is the policy code at the top of that piece of paper you have?
DJEA.
No,
Also-
he has EAC. That's why you have it. That is not the one we need.
So I digress. That actually I need back because we need the DJEA, and that's not what that is.
We need a markup copy of this one.
Thank you.
And that's an extra, so you can have that. Thank you. Okay, so
They both
now-
started with purchasing. I got confused.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Cards and credit cards.
Yes.
These are not changes coming from the legislature, but changes that we are requesting and recommending as an administration, just to bring the policy language in line with our work. The first change here just makes a slight tweak to the language. There shall be a per transaction limit of $2,000 on the purchasing card, except for select individuals whose transaction limit is above that cap. I reached out to procurement just to get a better understanding of these specific situations, and we of course try to keep them as limited as possible. One exception is for the athletics department. Say a team makes it to the playoffs and they need to quickly arrange for outside transportation for students to that game, meals that can sometimes go a little bit over that $2,000 threshold. We also have spelled out here that our maintenance team will, on occasion, need to swipe a card for a purchase of some tool, some supply that they need to quickly procure. And and make a purchase without going through the formal process. So those are the exceptions there, but of course, we try to limit that as much as possible. We're also suggesting that we delete the last sentence in that paragraph. Further down in the policy, we fixed the typo on paragraph number 5, just lowercase, mentioning gift cards for students purchased under special circumstances. In paragraph 8, we talk about clothing and the exceptions for where purchases of clothing are allowed, clothing directly related to instructional purposes, lab coats for science classes, etc. Another typo change in paragraph 10, travel-related expenses except for local registration or out-of-state registration funded with federal dollars. And we're also recommending that we remove these last 2 paragraphs. That's language that, lives better in an administrative regulation or an SOP, but is not good policy language for what we're trying to accomplish here. And we're asking for approval of these changes for first reading by the full board.
Board Member Briscoe Brown.
Section 10. Please explain to me why we are paying for registration for private school employees? On a P card?
I would have to ask for examples of what this purpose is. I'm sure it's a very limited universe of transactions. I don't know if there could potentially be a partnership where there's some type of training provided or
But
a specific type of student support.
I'm not sure that sentence says what we want it to say. And
Confused what it means.
before we take it to the full board, I would like for someone in purchasing to read that sentence very carefully and tell me whether that's actually the intended language. Because right now, what I think that says in plain English is that we are not paying for travel-related expenses for any APS employees
On a purchasing card.
on a purchasing card, but we are paying for registration for charter school or private school employees.
Dr. Bracken just texted me.
Okay.
She's watching. And she just pointed out that, we manage the federal funds for all private schools. So this must be an expense related to some federally funded training, support, federal dollars.
Can we clarify that?
Yeah, yeah.
Because if I didn't understand it, I'm pretty sure that the people who are directly affected by this may be confused as well. And certainly our employees who are using P cards, I think we need to be very, very clear on our use of these purchasing cards. And if somebody is confused by the language, then we are not accomplishing our purpose.
Yes, we'll work with finance and purchasing. I think it's one of those situations where this is written in their language and they do that every day and they understand it much better, but it spelled out here for a more general audience, I can understand the confusion.
If we're making a list of inappropriate expenses on a P card, it needs to be in language that the people using the P cards understand, not the people paying the P cards.
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Okay. Are there any other comments or questions on this policy?
It's times like this you're going to be glad to be rid of me.
No, no. I believe that we've been elected to do work, and that's what you bring to the table, and it's always valued. Yeah, so I agree. I think that could be clarified a little better. And I don't know, maybe even some explanation or
Yeah.
IE in there or something like that. Yeah, okay. Can we move on to JCDAF until?
Clarification on the purchasing card with a change to the language from finance and purchasing. Can we move this on for first reading in December?
I'm fine with that, as long as we can get that one into language that the
Yes.
average person using a P card can understand.
I agree. I'm okay with moving it forward. Chair Mitchell?
Yeah, I would be okay moving it forward, as long as we get a revised draft of it before, before the next meeting.
Yes, you all will see these revisions, of course, in your one-on-one meetings. They'll be reflected in assembly in advance of the December board meeting.
Okay.
Next policy up, JCDAF, use of electronic devices by students. You all will recall all of the work of the legislature around the Distraction-Free Education Act. Of course, our current board policy already allows for us to restrict student access to their personal cell phones during the instructional day from bell to bell. But the legislation requires us to go further than the cell phone itself and to include a number of devices as being restricted to student access. We have wonderful language here provided by our legal team that sets out exactly how we are going to protect our students from distraction in the classroom. You'll first see here in the first sentence, the Atlanta Board of Education has as its highest priority an emphasis on student success and promoting a positive learning environment free from electronic distractions. We're going to take out what was already there and include new language that just lists out those specific devices that are banned from access during the school day, including but not limited to cell phones, smartwatches, tablets, e-readers, headphones, earbuds, and other devices with functionalities such as wireless communication, internet access, messaging, video recording, gaming, social media access, or data transmission during school hours. Mr. Committee Chair had a great suggestion that we include in this list smart glasses, which are also internet enabled, and are becoming more and more popular and accessible to students. I can make that addition there, smart glasses, to this list. Further in the policy, the next paragraph, the use of mobile telephones and other PEDs before and after the school day is a privilege extended to students with the consent of parents. All devices must be out of sight and turned off during the entire school day while on school-provided transportation and on school buses. We further make clear that photographing, audio, or video recording is prohibited without the consent of school administration or designee. We're going to strike a sentence, but then add that nothing in this policy is intended to interfere with student access to school equipment provided to students for instructional purposes. Of course, we're going to protect our students with IEPs and Section 504 plans that explicitly mandate the use of PEDs. And parents wishing to reach their child during school hours should contact their child's school directly. These changes are required by legislation. They should be made by each district by January of 2026. So a first reading in December would put us in line to be compliant with the new law.
Okay. I have a couple questions, but do you have anything first?
Yeah, I do. Since we took out that first sentence, we took out the definition of PED, and the first time we reference that, we need to say personal electronic devices. And the only other one, I've just lost it. Oh, there it is, about halfway through the second paragraph where we talk about photographing,
Yes.
audio recording, or videotaping. It says, while on school system premises. I think we should include school-provided transportation and school buses
Okay.
in that. I don't know, I'd be interested in an opinion of general counsel as to whether we can also limit it during school functions off campus. If I'm a cheerleader for a school and we're at, say, a private school for a game, can you limit me from taking video while I'm representing the school at a place that is not school system premises or a bus?
That is going to be really difficult to do. I would not recommend going that far. Those kinds of things that you're talking about, first of all, are public events.
Yeah.
So to limit that kind of recording, which is, it's not against the law, right? We're a one-party state, but we can make it against policy within our sphere of control.
Okay. So, but I'd like to see us add buses.
And school-provided transportation.
Yeah.
Okay. Up there on the first paragraph, that new language, it does spell out students are not permitted to access personal electronic devices.
Okay.
Should I maybe just add
Just add PEDs.
in the
Yeah.
parenthetical? Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, a couple things for me. First, and we talked about this yesterday in our prep meeting, but explicitly saying K-12, because we do reference Georgia law stops at K-8, and what I explained to Ms. Long was, I could imagine my son being in 9th grade and being the smart aleck he is, to say, well, Georgia law says it only goes up to 8th grade, so if you're referencing policy based upon Georgia law, then that doesn't apply to me at the high school level. And as a district, we've been intentional about going beyond what Georgia law is calling for. So I think it behooves us to explicitly state that this applies for K through 12.
And so, and I just wanted to mention, as we discussed yesterday, one response to that is just stylistically, all of our policies are district-wide, and unless otherwise stated, they are rightly assumed to be applicable to every school across the district at every grade. But I do understand the importance of sort of positioning that we're moving a little bit faster and going broader than what we have to do under the legislation.
Yeah, that being said, I just know how savvy our kids are nowadays. And it just, I think, becomes a point of contention that's like unnecessary, is if we could just clarify it. That's my feel on that. The other thing, I do have some questions about it's like in the middle of the second paragraph, photographing, audio recording, or videotaping by any means another student or staff member is strictly prohibited while on school premises without the consent of school administrator or designee. Then it says, these prohibitions include all emergency situations unless the student is directed to use cell phone, cellular telephone, or PED by APS employee or other official. I don't love that line. I think about the instance where, there could be a big brawl, there could be a big fight, whatever the case may be. Oftentimes, it's student footage that kind of helps with accountability. So then if a student records this, hands it over to an administrator, are they then going to get in trouble as the person who's, filmed it? I think about, God forbid, like you had some major event at a school and a kid recorded it and it makes the news. Are we then going to punish that child because they recorded it in the school and they weren't explicitly told by an adult that they were allowed to record? I think explicitly saying that we don't want students to record in the event of an emergency, in the day and age that we live in, the cell phone is like a lot of times your last line of defense. I don't love that line.
I'm kind of at the other end, because in an emergency, heaven forbid, let's talk about an active shooter situation.
I was trying not to say it,
I-
but yeah.
I
I'm with you.
don't want kids pulling out their phones, making noise, creating light, which might attract the interest of the perpetrator. And I think that's also, if there's an emergency, I want my children paying attention to the grown-ups who are in charge and not on their phones recording or texting or trying to get hold of the media to say, I'm in lockdown. I think that's happened other places, and I want my child focused on their teacher who is saying, these are the rules. This is not a drill, and this is how you need to behave. I don't want them all with their phones lit up and making potential noises, because, as we all know, they're never all turned off. And can I also say, I assume we're collecting these. So, I mean, aren't most of our schools
Collecting
use
phones?
it? Yeah.
No. No, absolutely not. The intention, as I understand it, of our position on anti-PED policy is that students could still have them on their person, in their book bag, stored away. It's just that it can't be out. And I think that's a very important caveat. Like, the reason that the state legislature didn't move in the 9th through 12th grade is because we haven't answered the safety concerns. And for a lot of parents, having a cell phone on a child's person in the event of an emergency is a peace of mind. So if we were to collect them, that goes counter to everything, nor do I think we want the liability for the devices.
We have schools that have implemented in different ways, and so some of our schools, many of our secondary schools have yonder pouches. Some of our middle schools, when I think about secondary, they do a turn-in system. It just varies across the district. So far, it's actually been good. So we haven't had much issue at all around this.
Question: Does
I do have something I did wanted to say. I do think the flexibility and autonomy should be with the principal on how they implement the if they're collecting phones or devices, or students will have them in yonder packets or whatever. I think the school leadership would be best fit to determine that. I'm not in favor of collecting phones and having that liability or devices. I do think it should be kind of left on the school level and how they determine and how they see fit with that.
I completely agree with that. That each school should be should be given the autonomy, and in fact, I would like to see that in the policy somewhere. But to go back to the emergency situations, I don't know how to resolve this one. I mean, as a parent, I would want to know if my child was involved in an emergency situation, and in fact, I have had that happen with my own children. But again, I don't know that we want all the kids pulling out their phones and making noise and having light and all of that in a situation where that might increase the danger.
So, just insights as someone who has to facilitate lockdown drills, who lives through lockdown drills on a regular basis, unfortunately. A couple things. Most of the time, windows are covered, right? So the idea of light and all of that, honestly, is like a non-conversation. For the most part, we're covering windows. You're told to shelter in place. Anytime that I have been the unfortunate party to a real life lockdown situation, kids are not pulling out their phones. Like, folks are really taking it serious. It is a very traumatic experience to live through in real life. So I think some of the assumptions about the behavior of children in the midst of those type of an emergency is not in alignment with the reality of what happens.
I had a question about that sentence that is not about an emergency situation, but I do wonder if we can do something different with the wording. We say photographing, audio recording, or videotaping by a student of another student or staff member strictly prohibited while on school system premises without the consent of the administration. What if we're at a playoff football game at Lakewood Stadium and the student pulls out their phone to record the football team, to record the cheerleaders, the band is doing a routine? Could there be a situation where an adult says, you don't have the consent or the permission to do that?
Absolutely.
And is there a way in the language that we can protect against, just really get more tight, more closely aligned to what it is that we're trying to protect or prevent?
Can we say during instructional time?
Is what-
Because the idea of it is to reduce distractions during learning time. Like, that's the real, in my opinion, the spirit of the policy.
Well, but I think it's also to decrease cyberbullying. Let's take that same football game, and let's take, instead of that cell phone being aimed at the football teams, let's say it's aimed underneath the stands where a young couple have decided to enjoy themselves privately. And then that video ends up on social media. Or a bullying situation where a kid gets beaten up and then that gets shown on, then that gets uploaded to social media.
So there are separate disciplinary consequences for the fighting. There would be the disciplinary consequence around, that unsavory student behavior. But just reading this as stated right now, it feels like we're saying broadly that students are not allowed to do a recording activity that is not always inappropriate.
So how do we limit the inappropriate? And I appreciate that there would be consequences for the fighting or for the other inappropriate behavior, but would there be consequences for the student who videoed that and then put it on social media? Which is I think where we're going here.
So the way I interpret this, and the way I hear this, and I'm also mindful that we also have a G policy that prohibits our staff from secretly recording other staff members at work also. To me, it kind of goes to a student or staff member's right to not be surveilled in a way that is unknown to them, whether it be in a classroom, whether it be in the restroom, whether it be in the hallway, and they're having what they think is a private conversation during class change with a friend, but they're secretly being recorded by someone else. Or they think they're having a private conversation with someone they believe is a confidant, and that person is secretly recording them for and it's not interfering with instructional time, but it creates an environment where our students and staff members don't feel secure in their privacy. That, to me, is what this is getting at. I think, the emergency language, first of all, I don't know what qualifies as an emergency. Obviously, an active shooter would qualify as an emergency. I don't know that a group fight qualifies as an emergency every time, right? I mean, we know how to handle group fights in our schools, unfortunately. And it can also be disruptive for a bunch of people to whip out their phones and tape them, and they end up on social media and they create I just think this policy is about privacy and unwarranted surveillance, and we're going to have to leave it up to our staff members to use their good judgment on whether or not, let's say there is a student who videotapes an emergency against this policy, but it ends up saving the day, right? I have to believe
Yeah.
that as an organization, our people have enough good judgment and sense to say, maybe this kid does need to be suspended long-term for that.
A child was recently suspended for, in another district, let's be very clear about that,
Not here.
never in APS, for sharing that some violence was going to occur at the school, likely save lives, and this child was still punished. So, like, while we may have the makeup of some good sense, we're looking 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, where it could be a different makeup of folks who may think differently.
But let me say, we're writing a policy for us. And we're creating the conditions, and we're creating the expectations for what happens in this organization.
That sounds good. And I don't disagree with the spirit of what you're saying, but what I do know is that, you know, we're a system. And this system rolls whether or not all of us show up or don't. And there are consequences to how other people interpret the policies that we lay out. And for me, I think about, especially given how vulnerable the kids are that we serve can be, to folks who are overzealous about being punitive or punishing them. I don't trust everybody's judgment to interpret our policies in a way that favors our kids. I just don't.
Well, in that case, I just want to talk just real quick. Then the regulation needs to, or the protocols needs to be a little bit more detailed from what the policy directives is stating. I do, however, feel like if I take myself out the board member role and I say, okay, I'm gonna talk as a parent, I would like to have my kids have access to their phones in case of emergency. Point blank clear. I don't determine what the emergency is. That's why it's called an emergency. Things happen. And I would like to be communicated with. That's just me as a parent. Now, as a board member with my governance hat on, you know, it's kind of like, what is the best interest of the student? What is the best interest of the district as well? But then I also think the regulations and other things that are implemented on the school level should be left up to the district. And I know Dr. Johnson was going to say something about that, so I'm just going to stop talking at the moment. And I apologize, I have to jump off at 1 o'clock, but I just wanted to kind of just give my input on that.
Yeah, I don't know, Chair, if I was going to speak to the regulation implementation at the school level. I think is what you were speaking to. I think this is a challenging conversation. I will say, let me just point of clarity. We have not experienced broad issues with this year at all. So we're spending a lot of time on this right now, but we've not experienced broad issue with this at all. This middle paragraph is where I'm hearing there's some energy around, right, for just around the recording piece. I guess my question I would have, and I don't know, Erica or Nene may know this portion in not minus edits. This portion has been in place since, was it 2000, or do you know if this was the revised in 19? Do you think this was the original, like the original? I know there may be edits to what was originally there, but in some spirit, this portion has been there since.
Probably in 2019 it was added, is my guess. I don't know that.
Got it.
I believe it was added in 2019.
In 2019. Okay.
So it's been around.
Yeah, it's been around, and I guess the reason I was asking that point for clarity is, again, it's another situation where we have not experienced, and I will tell you, our folks know how to use Let's Talk, which is an awesome tool. Our people know how to email. Our community knows how to get access to us. This, in the 16, 15 months I've been here, this has not been a theme or an identified issue on either front. On the parent front, I get to meet with parents, students, administrators, teachers. This particular thing in regards, like, there's more energy about the first, there was more energy about the first paragraph and what it was going to look like to start the year versus kind of some of the nuance that's within the second paragraph. So I just want to call out that absolutely, to all things, I think when I think about the spirit of the organization, the spirit of the policy, I haven't observed the issue from the spirit of the policy for the board.
I appreciate that insight. That being said, I'm willing to digress. I know that this is first reading, and surely there'll be folks who watch this, and I'll get some text messages and emails, or I won't. And so I'll just kind of, in the spirit of that, kind of wait to see what feedback is from folks, whether or not there's energy broadly from the public about that. Otherwise, I receive everything being said, and I'm okay with moving it forward to second reading.
To first read.
Well,
This is first read.
yeah, yes.
And what you just said about receiving comments, that's the point of that period between first read and second read.
Yep.
So if we put it up for first read, think about whether you
No, fair,
you want to
understood.
call attention to it, either with our colleagues or from the dais in December, and solicit those comments.
Correct.
Might I add, over the next several months, you will look at a student social media policy, separate from devices, but a social media policy that may help to clear up some of the bad behavior that we've been talking about in terms of what happens with something that's recorded.
Not to mention, Board Mitchell had sent some early language around AI policy as well. So that too is right around the corner, which I think is in alignment with this conversation as well. Okay. Ms. Long, would you like to go on to the next policy?
Yeah, let's go back to policy DJEA, Purchasing Authority, first reading. Thank you,
Thank you.
Michael, Board Office, for getting the copies of the
Yes.
marked up version. Yes, there are quite a few changes here. These are edits to the policy that were precipitated by legislative action. The administration, in our operations, finance, and procurement were excited about the changes to the bidding threshold for public works contracts, moving that from $100,000 to $250,000, but that necessitates some changes to our policy. On this first page, there are just a couple of stylistic changes and some typos that we identified. The substantive changes begin at the end of page 2. Here, paragraph 6, we talk about the different thresholds for the competitive bidding process. Subparagraph A, purchases of any item or group of items with a value of $10,000 to $99,999.99 may be made at the school department level, provided that an effort was made to obtain 3 written quotes. So just 3 quotes, not a competitive RFP process. Subparagraph B, purchases exceeding $99,999, except for public works contracts, and I will add in the definition of public works contracts here, require a formal solicitation process. Public works contracts exceeding $249,999.99 require a formal solicitation process. Next paragraph, paragraph 7, public works contracts, instead of capital projects, public works contracts with a total annual value of $250,000 or greater. And that is it for the changes. This was legislation that actually passed a couple of years before it was finally enacted, but making the changes at this time, approving them for first read, and then final approval in January would have us in line with the requirements of the new law. And be very helpful to our operations teams as they do the work that they do.
And so just for explicit clarity for the public, the changes of the amounts that we are allowing the administration to approve without board approval is in alignment with state law and not something that we decided we wanted.
That's right, exactly. HB 137 was a bill passed earlier this year, signed into law by the governor, and it just allows a lot more flexibility for those public works contracts, which is particularly helpful around construction, school facilities.
And for the sake of the conversation, are we able to define what public works covers?
Yes, it covers fixed capital assets belonging to a public agency. I jumbled up that wording a little bit, but a fixed asset, a building,
Okay.
you know, as opposed to something that is not, as opposed to software or, yeah.
That's a
personnel.
defined term in the industry.
Yes.
And in law, yeah.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Board Member Briscoe Brown, do you have any?
I got nothing.
No
This is-
typos, nothing?
Nothing.
Oh, man.
Shout out Dan Drake if you're listening. Right.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think we're good with moving forward on that policy.
Yes, that would go forward for first read?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Ms. Long?
Okay, and then you asked to bring for discussion, Board Regulation BBF R5, Advisory Committees, Accountability Committee. And I've pulled that up here. And Mr. Committee Chair, I'll let you start out with discussing
Yeah.
this board policy.
So yes, as it stands, our accountability committee policy states that the board chair is also the chair of the accountability committee. Historically, that's not operated that way. We've used the vice chair to chair the committee, but that is in conflict with what the policy says. What I'm proposing that we do is change the policy to say that either the board chair or board vice chair be a member of the accountability committee, but allowing the board chair to decide who the accountability chair will be, as opposed to it being by default the board chair or vice chair. The spirit of what I'm thinking is that there could very potentially be a board member who is better equipped, either by capacity, skill set, whatever, to serve as the chair of the accountability committee. And I'd like to offer our chairs the autonomy to pick the person who's best suited for that function, as opposed to by default having to be the chair of the accountability committee or it being the vice chair. So still same makeup of the committee, it's just the leadership, you have more autonomy.
I do think it's important for board leadership to be on the accountability committee.
Absolutely.
Because leadership interacts more directly, more frequently, and more deeply with the superintendent. And since the function of the accountability committee is to evaluate the superintendent's performance, that they may be privy, they are privy to information that the rest of the board is not. That said, I don't know that it matters whether board leadership chairs the committee. This is one committee I have never sat on. So, by choice, by the way. Never asked to sit on it. So I don't know whether it would be important to the way the accountability committee operates to have leadership in the chair of that committee. Dr. Johnson, you haven't had a lot of interaction with the accountability committee yet yourself, so.
No, the only thing I raise is just the scope of navigating the multiple committee chairs as superintendent. But there's some complexities to it, right? Because you've got a budget committee, we've got an audit committee, we've got, and so each of those committees ends up with a chair, and then you still have the chair of the board. So it does widen the scope a little bit, is what it is. I don't lose any sleep either way, right, on the decision making around that.
Confess that when this issue, when we first began talking about this, even though I was clearly on the policy committee when we last reviewed this, I actually thought it was supposed to be the vice chair who was chair of the accountability committee. And so I then went back and looked at it, and in fact, it is the chair. I don't know the last time that the chair of the board was chair of the accountability committee.
And typically what has happened is the chair says, I am chair of the board. That's enough. I'm designating the vice chair.
Right. That's been true at least 12 years.
Certainly before my time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this goes into one of those circumstances where we've been violating our own policy and there is no recourse for it. And why I think if we've kind of operated with effectively giving the board chair autonomy to decide who it's going to be, then we should just make it that way in policy. I would also add that, again, I think capacity matters, and especially with this particular committee, it's not a regular standing committee. They don't meet every month. They meet like quarterly. I think the most important function of this committee is to come up with the assessment tool for the superintendent that the entire board will use to assess. That being said, like you also have to have someone who's going to A, remember to call the meetings, B, actually show up for the meetings, and C, make sure that the committee creates the tool in a respectable amount of time so that the board can do its due diligence in the assessment of the superintendent. That being said, I just lean towards flexibility. I completely agree, Board Member Briscoe Brown, with what you said about insights that the board chair, board vice chair would have because of their closer working relationship with the superintendent and the value add that is for the that committee. So I have no qualms about one of the two being a member, standing member on that committee.
So maybe what we need to do is in the second paragraph say the committee is composed of at least 3 board members, including the board chair or vice chair.
Yes.
Okay, and then leave the next paragraph the way it is, and
Second to last
and then
line.
in the third sentence say the board chair shall appoint the chair of the accountability committee.
Yes. That's where I'm at.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Basically, right.
My guess is that most board chairs, my guess is that the pattern we set without realizing we were violating the policy is likely to continue, but certainly the flexibility is not a bad thing.
Could, but at least we wouldn't be in violation.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I would just say my former superintendent, I interface with the chair the most directly around the accountability and evaluation process. Historically, I did, because that's who you're most, you know what I mean, like most directly day to day a lot of times. Now, I spend a lot of time with all 9 school, I try to spend a lot of time with all 9 school board members, so this doesn't matter to me. It's based on how the board wants to operate.
Well, and the chair
Could still appoint themselves.
could still appoint
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I would like to push that through because it's a change that I would like us to have in effect by January when we're making new appointments. And that being said, should we meet in December, I'll send over the draft language that Chair Mitchell sent to us around AI policy so that we can have that on the agenda for next month. My hope is, should we have the meeting next month, it'll be the first time that we have a student sitting on the dais during a committee meeting. So that's going to be a really cool historic moment, and I'm praying Board Member Briscoe Brown gets to do her last committee, policy committee victory lap with a student on the dais. No typos. With no typos.
Typos.
And maybe we find a student who's a great proofreader too, So, yes. That being said, is there, Mr. Wilborn, do we have any stakeholders who have signed up for public comment?
No stakeholders have signed up for public comment.
disappointing. I would now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Do we have any other matters for discussion? Is there any other business?
Is there any other business, Ms.
It
Long?
says discussion of upcoming policies for review and consideration.
Do we have an update on updating our original adopting date and last revised date for our policies in Assembly? As I understand it, it's not correct, and so we're not always certain what hasn't been reviewed and when. I have a lot of energy around us getting that correct, especially in the spirit of us trying to create a regular cadence for reviewing policies. And we pay a hefty price for the Assembly, for Assembly as well. So I kind of wanted to do the things it's supposed to do.
At this point, we've been in Assembly more than 5 years.
I'm gonna talk about it.
And so anything that isn't listed, anything that isn't correct, will be more than 5 years old. It will have been more than 5 years since we reviewed it.
So you're saying anything
Assuming-
pre-21?
Assuming that Assembly is correct on a going forward basis from the date that we changed vendors from board docs. Anything that started in, anything from that date forward should be correct, which means that anything prior to that, yeah. And we should be reviewing
Everything
more,
that says 20
yeah,
and
every 5 years anyway. So that's our commitment. And so at this point, yes, we need to get it right because we need to get it right. Because we need to have a record of what the policy committee of the board has done. But for purposes of establishing a regular cadence, we can assume that anything that hasn't been looked at since we started in Assembly needs to be looked at, because it hasn't been looked at in more than 5 years. We went to Assembly when it
I wanna
was,
say
it was
2021. I know it was COVID. I know it was COVID.
We went to Assembly while Leslie Grant was still on the board, and she rolled off early in '22. So
Yeah, it's been a
it's been
minute.
prior to December of '21, so I guess it's, and I think it was prior to that. So it's close to 5 years. And at some point, again, anything that hasn't been looked at since we went to Assembly needs to be looked at.
And I would wonder also, and this may be asking for too much, but if we can include a notation of every time a policy was reviewed and revised, whether it's possible to link to what that version of the policy was so we can see the life cycle of the policy. Right, so, let's say this, we just looked at a policy that was last revised in 2019. Is it possible to link to the 2019 version? That's the question. Yeah. Right, and I think would make it easier, honestly, for board members and for the rest of us to see.
We
how a
had that
policy
question
evolves.
today. Was this revised in
Exactly.
2018, or does this go back to 2010? And so it would have been nice to be able to go back to that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had policies that, I mean, it looked like they hadn't been reviewed in 20 years, but they had been reviewed 5 years ago, 4 years ago. You know, we just got to get our data right. And it's just one of those things. Like, we got to get our data right. And so I'm hoping that, especially having this conversation from the dais right now, that, you know, it puts the gas behind this thing to go and get it right. Because it's going to help us navigate this better. We're going to do our job in reviewing these policies and making sure things don't go lapsed. But we're only able to do the job if we know. So, okay. That being said, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
I'll second it myself.
Okay.
All right. Are there any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you.